on, everybody? It's me again, Gold and Blue Dude. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. This channel is home of at least one college football video every single day. We're on our last day at Disney. Well, I guess second to the last day, because we're actually leaving tomorrow, and I actually don't feel good at all today. I'm dizzy, I'm a little nauseous. I actually had to take a time out from the park. I was going to drive back to the house. I don't even feel like driving back to the house. So I thought I'd get a quick video in here. I don't know if it's going to be any good because I'm sick, so bear with me. We'll try to get through this. By the way, don't forget about our score prediction contest. Every single week I pick out one game and a tiebreaker game for my Patreons to guess the score of. And whoever gets the closest to the actual score wins $20 every single week, and you can win as many times as you want. And congratulations once again to Paul Riggs. He won this past week. I think that makes his 6th win. I think he'll be the winner of my first annual score prediction contest, so he'll probably get the plaque. Blue members get 1 guest prediction per week, gold members get 2 guest predictions per week, and champion members get 4 guest predictions per week. This week's game is number 2, Ohio State at number 5, Michigan. And the tiebreaker is going to be number 10, Oklahoma at number 7, Oklahoma State. So don't forget to go over and join my Patreon page and email me your score prediction for your chance of winning $20. And this will not be the last opportunity, because we'll be doing conference championships, bowls, the playoffs, and the national championship. So still plenty of money to be won. So today I decided to make a video on the top 10 final playoff rankings, in my opinion, as far as how I would want it to turn out. That's actually feasible. I mean, there's a lot of crazy things out there that could happen, and who knows who's actually going to finish in the top 4. But these are the top 10 ways this college football season could end as far as the 4 teams making the playoffs. This isn't based on what's the most likely or anything like that. This is just my personal favorite top 10. So let's start off with number 10. We're going to say that Georgia loses to Alabama, Ohio State wins out, and Cincinnati wins out. In that scenario, I think number 1 would be Alabama, number 2 would be Ohio State, number 3 would be Georgia, and number 4 would be Cincinnati. Now, if those things happen, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that that would be the 4 teams that would finish, but in my eyes, that would make the most sense in that particular scenario. So that's another thing that's really not predictable. So even if this stuff does happen, it doesn't necessarily mean that the 4 teams that I have in the top 4 would be the top 4. So that's my least favorite out of the top 10. And yes, I do think if Alabama beats Georgia, they would put Alabama at the 1 spot. Ohio State would be at 2. They would slide Georgia down to 3, and Cincinnati would sneak in at 4. So you'd have the 1 seed Alabama versus the 4 seed Cincinnati, and the 2 seed Ohio State versus the 3 seed Georgia. That's not a bad playoff. Number 9, let's say Georgia wins out, Michigan wins out, Cincinnati loses, Notre Dame wins, and Oklahoma, not Oklahoma State, Oklahoma wins out. Here's how I think the top 4 would shake out. Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Michigan. Yes, if they beat Ohio State and then win the Big Ten Championship, I think they would go up to 2. Notre Dame would sneak in at number 3. And then number 4 would be Oklahoma, a 1-loss Big 12 champion. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia versus the 4 seed Oklahoma, and the 2 seed Michigan against the 3 seed Notre Dame. That 2-3 matchup looks really, really good. That would be okay. Not one of my most favorites, but it would be okay. Number 8, guys. Let's say Georgia wins out, Ohio State wins out, Cincinnati loses, Notre Dame wins, and Oklahoma wins out in this scenario. Here's how I think the Final 4 would look like. Number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Ohio State. Number 3, Notre Dame. And number 4, Oklahoma. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia playing the 4 seed Oklahoma, the 2 seed Ohio State playing the 3 seed Notre Dame. Not a bad playoff. Number 7 on my list. Georgia wins out. Michigan wins out again. Cincinnati loses. Notre Dame wins. And Oklahoma State wins out. In this scenario, number 1, Georgia. Number 2, Michigan. Number 3, Oklahoma State. And number 4, Notre Dame. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia against the 4 seed Notre Dame. That would be a blowout. And the 2 seed Michigan against the 3 seed Oklahoma State. That game right there, that might be a good game. So you'd have the national championship, maybe Georgia versus Michigan, Georgia versus Oklahoma State. I'm not really buying that. But I do think it would be an interesting finish. Number 6 on my favorite finishes. Georgia wins out. Ohio State wins out. Cincinnati wins out. Notre Dame wins out. And Oklahoma State loses. in this scenario, I do think number 1 would be Georgia, number 2, Ohio State, number 3, Cincinnati, number 4, Notre Dame. So the matchups would be number 1, Georgia against number 4, Notre Dame. Again, yawner. But number 2, Ohio State versus number 3, Cincinnati. Yes, sign me up for that. And I think it would be the winner of that versus Georgia. So we would be looking at either Georgia versus Ohio State or Georgia versus Cincinnati. I think that would be a great national championship. Number 5, Georgia wins out, Michigan wins out, Cincinnati wins out, and Oklahoma wins out. In that scenario, number 1, Georgia, number 2, Michigan, number 3, Cincinnati, and number 4, Oklahoma. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia taking on the 4 seed Oklahoma. Don't think it would be that much of a game. And then you'd have the 2 seed Michigan against the 3 seed Cincinnati. I think that would be a great game. And I do think Cincinnati would beat Michigan. And it would be Georgia versus Cincinnati in the national championship. And yes, you already know, I'm very much okay with that. The number 4 scenario that I would like to see played out. Georgia wins out, Michigan wins out, Cincinnati wins out, and Oklahoma State wins out. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia, the 2 seed Cincinnati, the 3 seed Michigan, and the 4 seed Oklahoma State. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia playing the 4 seed Oklahoma State. I think that would be a pretty good game. I do think Georgia would win, probably convincingly. But I think Oklahoma State could scare them a little bit. And then, of course, you'd have that Cincinnati-Michigan matchup that I talked about earlier. Great matchup. And probably Georgia versus Cincinnati. Yes, I'm liking that matchup. Number 3 for my favorite finishes to the season. Georgia wins out, Ohio State wins out, Cincinnati wins out, and Oklahoma wins out. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia versus the 4 seed Oklahoma. Yes, that would probably be a yawner. But then again, you'd still have that number 2 Ohio State versus number 3 Cincinnati matchup. I really like that matchup. And the winner of that playing Georgia. I love that combination right there. That's why I have it at number 3. All right, it's time for number 2, my second favorite finish to the season. Michigan beats Ohio State but loses to Wisconsin. And you could actually interchange that with Ohio State. Whoever wins that game loses to Wisconsin. Georgia wins out, Cincinnati wins out, Oklahoma State wins out, and Notre Dame wins. So in this scenario, number 1, Georgia, number 2, Cincinnati, number 3, Oklahoma State, number 4, Notre Dame. So you'd have the 1 seed Georgia against the 4 seed Notre Dame. Yes, probably a yawn fest. But after that, number 2, Cincinnati against number 3, Oklahoma State. I think that would be an amazing game. And then, of course, the winner of that taking on Georgia probably would be Cincinnati. And, of course, you already know, I love that matchup. I want to see the rematch of the Peach Bowl from last year. That brings me to my number 1 situation. This is my favorite situation. This is how I hope it shakes out. Georgia wins out. Ohio State wins out. Cincinnati wins out. Oklahoma State wins out. And just for good measure, Notre Dame loses. So, the 1 seed Georgia, the 2 seed Ohio State, the 3 seed Cincinnati, and the 4 seed Oklahoma State. So we'd have the 1 seed Georgia taking on the 4 seed Oklahoma State. Decent game, better than Georgia-Oklahoma, better than Georgia-Notre Dame. And then, of course, the 2-3 matchup, Ohio State versus Cincinnati. I want that to happen. And then the winner of that taking on Georgia. So that's my dream scenario. That's how I want it to shake out. But, of course, things don't always go as planned. So we'll have to stay tuned, see how the regular season finishes up, see how the conference championships finish out, and then on to the playoffs. And you never know what the playoff committee is going to do. Even if some of this stuff happens, they might not rank him the way I would have him ranked. So buckle up. We ain't done yet. That's all I got for you for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.